Young billionaire hires a homeless woman to take care of his gardens while he travels. When he returns unannounced, he's shocked to see what she was doing with his 4-year-old daughter. Noah Lancaster walked through the double doors of his mansion, swallowed by silence. Always that silence. The same silence that had followed him for exactly 365 days. He tossed the Bentley keys onto the marble table, and the sound echoed through the empty foyer. He didn't even need to call out to know that no one would come running to greet him. Not anymore. At 32, Noah had achieved what few men manage in a lifetime. His name was among the youngest billionaires in the country. He owned a tech company valued in the billions, 3 mansions, 5 luxury cars, and a watch collection worth more than some Manhattan apartments. However, the only clock that mattered now was the one counting the time without Claire. A year. A year since they found her car overturned on the highway. A year since the funeral, where he didn't shed a single public tear. Mr. Lancaster, we weren't expecting you so soon. Margaret Dram, the housekeeper, appeared with her usual discreet demeanor. Would you like me to serve dinner? No. I'm going to work in the office. I don't want to be disturbed. Margaret nodded. Used to that response, Noah climbed the stairs without looking at the family portraits on the walls. He passed Lily's room but didn't go in. The door was ajar, and for a moment his eyes caught the image of the little girl sitting on the floor, alone, slowly moving puzzle pieces around. 4 years old. Lily was only 4 and barely spoke these days. The therapist said it was her response to trauma, to losing her mother, but Noah knew it was more than that. It was also a response to him, the father who had turned into a stranger. In the office, he opened his laptop and immersed himself in spreadsheets and emails. Work. Always work. That was where he hid his pain, his anger, his failure. That was where he could control everything, unlike real life, which had shown him in the worst possible way that some things money simply can't buy. Hours later, in the early hours of the morning, Noah poured himself a whiskey and walked to the window. Outside, the garden Claire loved so much was dying. No one had taken care of it since she was gone. The dry flowers and yellowed grass were yet another reminder of what he had lost. It started to rain outside. Inside the mansion, the silence continued, a silence once filled with laughter, piano music, and Claire's sweet voice calling his name. Now the mansion was just that, walls and expensive furniture holding memories no one spoke of anymore, a mausoleum for the living. Noah closed the curtains. Tomorrow would just be another day of being the man he had become, cold, calculating, empty. The man who believed that if he felt nothing, then pain couldn't reach him. He was wrong, of course, but he didn't know that yet. Morning arrived grey and damp after a night of rain. Noah left earlier than usual, with 3 impeccably organized suitcases in the Bentley's trunk. Frankie, his driver, was already waiting outside, discreet in his black suit. "To the airport, sir?" Frank asked, opening the rear door. "Not yet. I need to handle a few details at the company first." Noah checked his watch. His private jet was scheduled to depart in 4 hours. The trip to Shanghai was important, a merger that could double the value of his shares. That was what he was thinking about when his eyes caught sight of a strange figure standing by the mansion's gates. He frowned. "Who is that?" he asked Frank. Frank looked out the car window. "I don't know, sir. She's been there since I arrived about 20 minutes ago." "Shall I ask security to remove her?" Noah narrowed his eyes. It was a woman, maybe in her late 20s, wearing worn, simple clothes. She didn't seem threatening, but she also didn't look like someone who typically showed up in that exclusive neighborhood. "I'll talk to her myself." Noah got out of the car, his steps resolute. As he approached, he noticed details he hadn't seen from afar. The woman had brown hair tied back in a simple bun, and despite her shabby clothes, there was a certain dignity in her posture. She didn't cower when he approached, as many would. "Can I help you?" he asked, in a polite but cold tone he used to dismiss unwanted visitors. She looked straight at him. Her intense green eyes showed neither fear nor submission. "Good morning, Mr. Lancaster," she said, her voice clear. "My name is Evelyn Turner. I'm looking for work and heard your garden is in need of care." Noah raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected such a direct response. Who told you that? No one had to. I passed by yesterday and saw the state of the garden. It's a shame to let such a beautiful space go to waste. Her frankness took him by surprise. There was something almost defiant in her tone, despite her polite words. I'm a gardener, she continued. I have experience with landscaping and historic garden restoration. I can provide references if you like. Noah regarded her with skepticism. His first instinct was to dismiss her. He didn't hire people who just showed up at his door, no matter how qualified they claimed to be. We're not hiring, he replied, turning away. Your garden disagrees, she said, not raising her voice, but firm enough to make Noah stop and turn back. What did you say? The garden. It was designed with species that need regular care. The shrubs are choking the roses, and the irrigation system is probably compromised after months of neglect. One more winter like this, and much of what was planted will be lost. Noah glanced over his shoulder at the garden. He couldn't remember the last time he'd really paid attention to it. Claire had been the one who cared for it. After she was gone, he'd told the cleaning staff to provide only the basics. Why should I hire you? He asked, still wary. I know nothing about you. Evelyn didn't hesitate. Because I'm willing to start right away. Because I know plants and what needs to be done. And because, she paused briefly, looking at the mansion, this garden deserves to come back to life. Something in those words struck Noah. He didn't show it, of course. Years of running businesses had taught him to hide his reactions, but for a fleeting moment he felt exposed, as if this stranger had spoken not only about the garden, but also about his own life. Her silence followed, only the distant sound of traffic and the wind in the trees. Noah weighed his options. He was about to leave for a 2-week trip. He had neither the time nor the interest to deal with this now. And then, for a reason he himself didn't understand, he heard himself saying, 2 weeks. I'm traveling on business and will be gone for 2 weeks. If you like, you can work in the garden during that time. Speak with the housekeeper. She'll give you access to the tools you need. Evelyn's face lit up with a small smile, the first since they'd started talking. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Lancaster. Don't thank me yet. When I get back, I'll decide if the job continues. He gave a curt nod and returned to the car, where Frank waited, clearly curious about the conversation. Noah offered no explanation. To the company, he ordered, opening his laptop as soon as he settled into the seat. Evelyn remained where she was, watching the car drive away. To any observer, Noah's decision might have seemed like an act of kindness, but for him it was just an irrelevant detail, something to check off his list before traveling. He had no idea how that impulsive decision would change his life. Margaret, the housekeeper, couldn't hide her surprise when Noah called to inform her about the temporary hire. A gardener, she asked, looking through the kitchen window at the woman waiting at the back entrance. Are you sure, Mr. Lancaster? It's just for 2 weeks, Margaret. She'll only work in the garden, not in the house. And make sure she stays away from Lily. Yes, sir. Margaret hung up, wearing a worried expression. In the 15 years she'd worked for the Lancaster family, she'd never seen the master hire anyone so impulsively, especially now, after everything that had happened. Evelyn waited patiently as Margaret opened the door. Mr. Lancaster informed me of the temporary arrangement, the housekeeper said, not entirely hiding her distrust. You can use the storage shed out back for your materials. The gardening tools are in the greenhouse. Thank you, Evelyn replied. I promise not to cause any trouble. Margaret gave a stiff nod and led Evelyn down the side path to the back of the property. The young woman looked around with alert eyes, not like someone admiring luxury, but someone assessing the work to be done. When they reached the greenhouse, Margaret was surprised by Evelyn's reaction. She didn't seem intimidated by the size of the garden or its neglected state. On the contrary, there was a certain determination in her gaze, as if she were facing a welcome challenge. Mrs. Clare loved this garden, Margaret commented, watching as Evelyn examined a rosebush nearly strangled by wild vines. I can see that, Evelyn replied, gently pushing aside the invasive branches. It was planted with care. Each section has its own personality. Margaret felt a lump in her throat. It was the first time in a year that anyone had spoken of Claire's garden that way. "Well, I'll leave you to your work." Lunch is served at noon for the staff in the back kitchen. Evelyn thanked her, and as soon as Margaret left, she took off her light coat, rolled up her sleeves, and began sorting the tools she'd need. She didn't have much time, and there was a lot to do. Meanwhile, on the mansion's second floor, a curious pair of eyes watched the scene. Lily Lancaster, in a pale blue dress with her blonde hair in 2 braids, sat on the window seat hugging a worn teddy bear. She watched, intrigued, as the unknown woman now moved through the garden with purpose, cutting dead branches and gathering dry leaves. It was the first new person she'd seen in a long time. More than that, it was the first person to touch her mother's garden since her mother had gone away. Sarah Miller, Lily's nanny, found the girl still by the window nearly an hour later. "Lily, sweetheart, it's time for your piano lesson." The girl didn't answer, her eyes still fixed on the figure below. Sarah followed her gaze and saw the new gardener. "Who is she?" Sarah asked, more to herself than to the child. Lily remained silent, but Sarah noticed a glimmer in her eyes she hadn't seen for a long time. Curiosity. "Come on, sweetheart. Ms. Winters is already waiting." Reluctantly, Lily climbed down from the window seat and followed Sarah to the music room. Her mind, however, stayed in the garden, with the stranger who dug in the soil and spoke to the plants. The next morning dawned clear. On the private airport runway, Noah Lancaster boarded his private jet to Shanghai. He had a folder full of contracts to review during the flight and didn't think once about the woman he had hired to tend the garden. For him, it was just a minor detail in his meticulously organized life. A small detour soon to be forgotten. His focus was on the negotiations ahead, on the millions to be gained or lost, depending on his decisions. As the jet took off, cutting through the clouds toward the east, Noah loosened his tie slightly and opened his laptop. 14 hours of flight ahead. 14 hours to prepare for corporate battles, far from the oppressive silence of the mansion and the memories it held. And more importantly, far from Lily's accusing eyes, which reminded him so much of Claire. Back at the mansion, Evelyn started her second day of work at sunrise. She wore simple but appropriate clothes, sturdy canvas pants, worn but comfortable boots, and a long-sleeved shirt to protect her arms from the sun and thorns. Margaret watched from the kitchen window as she prepared breakfast. There was something intriguing about this woman. She worked with a dedication Margaret rarely saw in temporary staff. Each movement was calculated. Every decision about what to prune or preserve seemed to come from deep knowledge. "She really knows what she's doing," Betty, the cook, commented, joining Margaret at the window. "Looks like it," Margaret agreed. "Still, I'll keep an eye on her." Mr. Lancaster was very clear that she stay away from Lily. Noah had always been protective of his daughter, but since Claire's death, that protectiveness had become almost obsessive. Visits were rare, and interactions with strangers even rarer. The outside world seemed like a constant threat to him. In the garden, Evelyn worked methodically and patiently. She had started with the flower beds closest to the house, where once magnificent rose bushes struggled to survive under invasive vines. With gentle but firm hands, she freed each plant, pruning what was needed, removing what was beyond saving. Occasionally, she paused to drink water from a bottle she'd brought and looked up at the mansion. It was an imposing building, 3 stories high with a Georgian facade, but there was something sad about it, as if the house itself were in mourning. During one of these breaks, Evelyn noticed for the first time a small face in the second-floor window, a blonde girl watching her intently. Evelyn smiled and waved discreetly. The face vanished immediately, like a frightened animal retreating to its burrow. Lily. Evelyn knew the name of Noah Lancaster's daughter, just as she knew about the tragedy that had struck the family a year earlier. Claire Lancaster's accident had made the news, even in the circles Evelyn frequented. The death of a young, beloved socialite always attracted attention. Returning to her work, Evelyn reflected on the irony of the situation. There she was, a woman who had lost everything, working for a man who, despite having all the money in the world, also seemed to have lost what mattered most. The hours passed quickly as she worked. The sun was high when Sarah came out to the garden, Lily by her side, holding her hand. "Good morning," Sarah called, keeping a safe distance. "You must be the new gardener." Evelyn stood up, removing her gloves to greet the nanny. "Evelyn Turner," she introduced herself with a smile. "I'm just tidying up the garden while Mr. Lancaster is away." Sarah nodded, studying Evelyn with cautious eyes. Next to her, Lily watched everything with an expression far too serious for a 4-year-old. "I'm Sarah, Lily's nanny," she said, placing a hand on the little girl's shoulder. "We were just going for a walk, right, Lily?" The girl didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the tools scattered on the grass. "It's nice to meet you," Evelyn said, bending slightly to be at Lily's eye level. "You must be Miss Lily. Your garden is very beautiful." Lily lifted her eyes to Evelyn, surprised at being addressed directly. Usually, adults talked about her, not to her. "It's not my garden," she said in a soft voice, almost a whisper. "It was my mom's." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Lily rarely spoke to strangers, and almost never mentioned her mother. Evelyn nodded seriously. "So it was your mother who liked the yellow roses. They're my favorites too." A flicker of interest flashed in Lily's eyes, but she said nothing more. Sarah, recovering from her surprise, gave a tense smile. "Well, we won't get in your way." "Come on, Lily." They continued along the stone path that circled the property. Evelyn went back to work, but every so often she felt Lily watching her from a distance. By the end of the day, as the sun began to set, Evelyn gathered her tools and looked with satisfaction at the work she had done. It was just a start, but she could already see the potential. The roses were free, the path was clear, and the fountains were clean. With the right timing and consistent care, that garden would once again become what it had been. As she walked to the back exit, Evelyn passed an area she hadn't explored yet. It was a small greenhouse, almost hidden among tall shrubs. The glass structure was dirty, and some panels were broken, but something inside caught her attention. Approaching carefully, she peered through the dusty glass. Inside, wilted but still alive, were dozens of orchids in various stages of neglect. Some had new buds fighting to survive, while others drooped sadly in their pots. The 5th day dawned with clear skies and a welcoming sun. Evelyn arrived early as usual, carrying a small extra bag along with her tools. Inside were seeds of various flowers, zinnias, daisies, and dwarf sunflowers, perfect for little hands to plant. She didn't expect to see Lily so early, but there was the girl sitting on the back step, waiting with a straw hat too big for her head, and a look of eagerness Evelyn had never seen before. "Good morning, Lily," Evelyn greeted, trying to hide her surprise. "You're up bright and early." Lily swung her legs, which didn't reach the ground. Her little shoes dangled in the air as she held the hat's brim so it wouldn't fall over her eyes. "Sarah said I could help you if you let me," the girl explained, her voice steadier than in previous days. "I promised not to get in the way." Evelyn smiled, feeling a wave of fondness. Over the past few days, Lily had gradually come closer, first just watching from afar, then asking occasional questions, and yesterday finally touching a rose petal when Evelyn invited her to. Each little step felt like a victory. "Of course you can help me. Actually, I have a special mission today that requires small, careful fingers." Lily's eyes shone with a spark of curiosity. "What mission?" Evelyn opened the bag and showed her the colorful seed packets. "We're going to create your own flower bed with fast-growing blooms. You'll be able to see them sprout in just a few days." Lily got off the step, hesitant but clearly intrigued. "Can I pick the colors?" "All of them. And we'll put a little sign with your name on it so everyone knows it's yours." The girl's face lit up with a shy smile, revealing a small gap where a baby tooth had recently fallen out. "I've never planted anything before." "Then today is your big day." 20 minutes later, Sarah came out to the garden looking for Lily and found a scene she never expected to see. The child crouched in the dirt, her hands dirty, laughing as Evelyn explained how each seed needed its own space so it wouldn't feel cramped when it grew. "Lily," Sarah exclaimed, half surprised, half relieved to find her. "You went outside without telling me." Lily looked up, but her hands stayed focused on scooping tiny holes in the freshly prepared bed. "Sorry, Sarah," she replied, not taking her eyes off the little hole she was digging, "but I had to come early to help with the baby flowers." Sarah watched the scene, torn between protective instinct and the joy of seeing Lily so animated. Since Claire's death, the girl had closed up like a small snail, speaking as little as possible and rarely smiling, spending hours just staring out the window. Now, her cheeks were flushed, and her dress was muddy, but she looked alive. "It's my fault," Evelyn intervened, standing up and wiping her hands on her gardening pants. "I should have asked for your permission before we started." Sarah shook her head, stepping closer. "No, it's fine. It's just that—" She hesitated, glancing at Lily, who was now carefully covering a seed with soil. "I haven't seen her like this in a long time." The two women exchanged a look of understanding. They didn't need to say out loud what both knew. This child had spent the last year in a state of sadness no 4-year-old should ever experience. "Can we finish planting before breakfast?" Sarah asked, surprising even herself by the suggestion. "We have a reading lesson after that, but maybe we can come back this afternoon." Lily's smile was answer enough. The next morning, Lily appeared with a drawing pad and colored pencils under her arm. Sarah followed, carrying a small folding table. "I want to draw the garden," the girl announced, more confidently than the day before. "To show Daddy when he comes back." Evelyn, who was pruning a shrub near the central fountain, smiled as they approached. Lily's hair was in 2 uneven braids, probably done by her own hands, and her yellow dress perfectly matched the daisies that were starting to bloom near the porch. "Great idea. How about sitting near that bench? From there, you can see the flower beds and the fountain." Lily nodded and ran to the spot, her dress fluttering in the breeze. Sarah followed with the small table, a folding chair and a bottle of water. "She asked to come out as soon as she woke up," Sarah said, watching Lily settle in with determination. "And she asked for that sketch pad. It belonged to her mother." Evelyn looked at the worn green notebook Lily now opened so reverently. The pages were yellowed at the edges, and some already had drawings, flowers and landscapes drawn by a talented adult hand. "Claire liked to draw?" Sarah nodded, lowering her voice so Lily wouldn't hear. "She was an artist. She painted and sketched the garden a lot." Lily used to sit beside her and try to copy. After Claire was gone, no one touched that sketch pad. Until today. Evelyn felt the weight of that information. This wasn't just a notebook, but a link to a mother who was no longer there, a connection Lily was finally ready to revisit. The morning passed peacefully. From time to time, Lily would call Evelyn over to show her progress. Simple, colorful lines representing flowers, butterflies, and the sky. "This is you," Lily said, pointing to a figure with dark hair among the flowers. Evelyn felt a lump in her throat as she saw the childish drawing, a woman with a big green smile. She'd used the blue pencil until it ran out, and thin arms surrounded by bright dots representing flowers. "It's beautiful, Lily. Can I show it to Margaret and Betty in the kitchen later?" The girl nodded, proud, and kept drawing, her tongue peeking out of the corner of her mouth in concentration. That afternoon, when they returned to the garden, Lily brought out a small watering can her size, which Sarah had found in the basement. "I want to water my seeds," she announced seriously. "Are they thirsty?" Evelyn showed her how to check the soil moisture before watering, guiding the child's small hand. "Plants let us know when they need water," she explained, helping Lily gently touch the earth. "Feel how it's still damp. That means it's good for now. What if it gets dry? Then we give them water. But not too much or they'll drown." Like people, the innocent question carried a weight that made Sarah and Evelyn exchange quick looks. There were so many layers of meaning there, so many connections to the tragedy that had changed this family's life. "Yes," Evelyn answered kindly. "Everything that lives needs balance." Lily considered this answer seriously, then nodded as though she'd understood a great truth. "I'm going to take care of them every day," she promised, pressing the little watering can to her chest. "Can I give them names?" "Of course. What names would you like?" Lily thought for a moment. "I'll call the yellow ones Sun, the red ones Strawberry, and the purple ones." She paused, searching for the word dream. Those are perfect names, Evelyn agreed, sharing a smile with Sarah. On the 6th day, it rained. A gentle, steady rain that Evelyn assured was the best gift for newly planted seeds. Lily was disappointed she couldn't go into the garden, but Evelyn suggested she draw pictures of what she imagined the seeds were doing underground. The girl spent the whole afternoon in the playroom, creating images of smiling seeds waking from a long sleep, stretching tiny green arms toward the surface. Seeds don't really have arms, she explained to Margaret when the housekeeper brought her afternoon tea. But I'm pretending they do so my drawing is more fun. Margaret, who had worked for the Lancasters since before Lily was born, froze for a moment, the tray trembling slightly in her hands. It was the longest sentence she had heard from the girl in months. "That's a lovely picture, dear," she managed to say, placing the tray on the small table. "Your father will love seeing it when he comes back." The mention of Noah caused a subtle change in Lily's expression. She lowered her eyes to her drawing, biting her lip. "Do you really think he'll like it?" she asked quietly. "Daddy doesn't like the garden anymore." Margaret sat beside her, choosing her words carefully. "Your father has been very busy and sad, sweetheart. But I'm sure he'll be happy to see you enjoying yourself." Lily didn't look entirely convinced, but she went back to her drawing, her face more pensive now. On the 7th day, the first surprise arrived. Lily came running into the garden in her pajamas and bunny slippers, with Sarah hurrying behind her carrying a jacket. "Evelyn! Evelyn!" the little girl called, her voice bursting with excitement. "Come see!" Evelyn, who had just arrived and was sorting her tools in the shed, dropped everything and followed Lily to the special flower bed they had planted. There, breaking through the surface, were tiny green points, the first seedlings beginning to sprout. "They're alive!" Lily shouted, kneeling down to look closer, not caring about the damp soil under her knees. "Look, Sarah, they sprouted." The genuine awe on the child's face was like a ray of sunshine after a long night. Evelyn knelt beside her, equally enchanted by Lily's reaction and by the simple miracle of new leaves. "They're brave, aren't they? They push through the heavy soil just to find the sun." Lily gazed at the tiny sprouts with admiration, almost reverence. How do they know they need to come up? It's in their nature. They always reach for the light, even when it's dark around them. This simple explanation seemed to touch something deep within Lily. She stayed silent for a moment, contemplating the seedlings. "Can we put the sign up now?" she asked at last. "So they know this is Lily's garden." Sarah, her eyes misty, quickly fetched the small wooden sign they had painted the day before. Lily placed the sign carefully, adjusting it several times until she was satisfied with its position. "And now it's official," Evelyn declared. "This is Lily's flower bed." The following days established a new routine. Lily spent more and more time in the garden, helping Evelyn with simple tasks, gathering dried leaves, watering plants, observing pollinating insects. Each day brought a new question, a new discovery, a broader smile. To everyone's surprise, Lily began showing an insatiable curiosity about everything living in the garden. She wanted to know the names of all the plants, how they grew, why some had thorns and others didn't. She asked about the insects, the birds visiting the feeders Evelyn had installed, and even the worms they found while turning the soil. "Why don't worms have eyes?" she asked one morning, watching one squirm in her fingers. "Because they live in the dark, underground. They don't need eyes down there." "So, how do they know where to go?" "They feel," Evelyn explained, gently guiding the worm back into the soil. "Some things we don't need to see to know they're there." Sarah, initially apprehensive, now brought books and lessons to the garden whenever the weather allowed. They sat under a tree's shade, and Lily practiced reading with nature-themed stories, much more interested now that she could see real examples around her. The girl who barely spoke now formed full sentences, asked questions, shared opinions. One afternoon, she surprised everyone by reciting from memory the names of all the flowers they had planted in the exact order. "She slept through the night without nightmares," Sarah told Evelyn one morning, as they watched Lily draw flowers on paper. "The first time in months. She's eating better too," added Margaret, who had joined them with a tray of lemonade. "Last night she asked for seconds at dinner. That hadn't happened since—" She didn't finish the sentence, but there was no need, they all knew. The garden also showed visible signs of transformation. The rose beds, once smothered by weeds, now displayed fresh buds. The paths were clearly defined, the central fountain worked again, and the stone benches had been cleaned and polished. Evelyn had discovered, hidden behind the greenhouse, a small stone table and child-sized chairs. After a thorough cleaning, it became Lily's favorite spot for snacks and drawing. Betty, the cook, told Margaret the garden was beginning to look like it did in Claire's time. "Will Mr. Lancaster approve of all this?" she whispered to Margaret as they prepared lunch, watching through the kitchen window. Lily was crouched beside Evelyn, both watching a ladybug on a daisy leaf. Margaret didn't answer immediately. Noah Lancaster had been hard to please since the tragedy. His grief had turned into a coldness that kept everyone at arm's length, including his own daughter. But could even he remain indifferent to his daughter's first genuine smile in an entire year? "I think what matters is that the girl is happy," Margaret finally said. "It's been so long since we've seen her like this," Betty agreed, watching Lily giggle openly when the ladybug suddenly flew away, landing on her arm. "I never thought he'd hire someone just on a whim," Margaret murmured, almost to herself. "Mr. Lancaster is usually so careful about who he lets in this house." "Maybe it was fate," Betty suggested, always the romantic one. Margaret wasn't one to believe in fate, but she had to admit Evelyn's arrival had brought a welcome change to that grief-stricken home. 9,000 kilometers away, in a conference room overlooking Shanghai's skyline of skyscrapers, Noah Lancaster was finalizing the details of the merger that had brought him to the other side of the world. The negotiations had been exhausting, the days filled with endless meetings, business dinners and contract reviews. There was little time to think about home or what might be happening there. His daily calls were brief and practical, check-ins with his assistant about how business was running, instructions for his legal team, a few questions for Margaret about the mansion. During a break between meetings, he called home as he always did. "How are things?" he asked Margaret after the usual greetings. "Everything's in order, sir." "Is Lily all right?" he asked, as he always did. "Yes, sir," Margaret replied, hesitating slightly. "Actually, she's been spending a lot of time in the garden." "In the garden?" Noah frowned, pausing from signing a document his assistant had placed before him. "I thought nobody used that space anymore." "The new gardener has been doing a good job, sir, and Lily seems to enjoy watching her." Noah paused, vaguely recalling the woman he'd hired on a whim before leaving, a decision he'd made without much thought, just to get rid of that stranger and get on with his day. "As long as everything's all right," he replied, changing the subject to more practical matters about the house. His assistant signaled that the next meeting was about to start. Noah ended the call quickly, focusing again on the numbers and clauses that filled his days. Not for a moment did he imagine that, while he discussed millions in an air-conditioned conference room in Shanghai, the true miracle was happening in his own backyard, where a silent child was talking, laughing and dreaming again, thanks to a bit of soil, some seeds, and the infinite patience of a determined green-eyed gardener. In his world of business and contracts, Noah Lancaster believed he controlled every variable, could predict every outcome. But he had no idea about the quiet revolution taking place in his own home, a revolution born of childish laughter and blooming flowers under the summer sun. Noah Lancaster rubbed his tired eyes as the Bentley passed through the mansion gates. The trip back from Shanghai had been exhausting. A 16-hour flight, an unexpected layover in Dubai, and turbulence that made sleep impossible. But the merger was complete, 3 days ahead of schedule, and he returned with a signed $1.2 billion contract. "We arrived earlier than expected, sir," Frank noted, adjusting the rear-view mirror. "You didn't notify the household staff?" "No," Noah replied curtly. "I prefer it this way." The truth was that he hadn't planned on coming back early. He made the decision right after the final signature. His associates had suggested he stay for the celebration party, but something drove him to return. It wasn't longing, at least that's what he told himself. It was mere practicality. The car circled the driveway, and Noah frowned at the sight. The front garden, once neglected, was unrecognizable. The neatly trimmed hedges framed the entrance path. The flower beds, which had been mere yellow patches 2 weeks ago, now displayed vibrant blooms in full flower. The central fountain, shut off since Claire's death, was flowing with crystal-clear water, the soft sound creating a serene atmosphere. "Looks like the new gardener took her work seriously," Frank remarked, noticing Noah's surprise. Noah didn't reply. He got out of the car and paused for a moment, inspecting the transformation. The place looked exactly as Claire used to keep it, immaculate, harmonious, full of life. A knot formed in his throat. For a moment, it was almost as if time had rolled back, as if stepping inside he might find Claire waiting with her radiant smile. Following the stone path, he noticed more details. The carefully pruned and blooming rose bushes, the ornamental shrubs shaped into elegant forms, the climbing vines on the house's facade, now contained and guided to frame the windows rather than overwhelm them. This wasn't the work of a mere temporary gardener. It was the work of someone who understood landscape design, someone with talent and dedication. He entered the house without announcing himself, expecting the usual stillness that had reigned since Claire's death. Instead, he heard something that left him momentarily paralyzed. Laughter. Lily's laughter. Following the sound, he walked through the main hall toward the French doors leading to the back gardens. Through the glass, he saw a scene he never expected. The once overgrown backyard garden was completely transformed. Where weeds and wild shrubs had taken over, there were now organized flower beds of various colors. The paths were clean and defined, the pergola restored and covered with blooming vines, and the small greenhouse, abandoned for so long, had sparkling clean windows in the sunshine. In the middle of this transformation, sitting on a picnic blanket on the grass, was Lily. She wore a yellow dress stained with dirt, her hair loose in the wind, laughing with abandon. Next to her was a brown-haired woman with a loose bun, dressed simply and practically, also smudged with dirt. Both were bent over a sketchbook. It took Noah a moment to recognize the woman. Evelyn, the gardener he had hired on impulse before his trip. But it wasn't the recognition that kept him rooted to the spot. It was the shock of seeing his daughter, his once silent and withdrawn Lily, completely at ease, happy, engaged with a stranger. Something strange happened inside him. It wasn't joy at seeing his daughter happy, as it should have been. It was a wave of jealousy mixed with a sharp sense of betrayal. How had this woman, a complete stranger, managed what he couldn't achieve in months? How dare she take his place, form a bond with Lily that he himself didn't have? Noah stepped forward, making the floor creak beneath his shoes. The sound alerted the two in the garden. Lily was the first to turn her head, and for a moment, Noah saw something in her eyes that hurt him, surprise, almost disappointment. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, but she didn't run to hug him as she once would. Evelyn stood up quickly, wiping her hands on her pants. There was caution on her face, as if sensing what was coming. "Mr. Lancaster," she greeted with a small nod. "We weren't expecting you back so soon." "Clearly," he replied, his tone cold as ice. His eyes scanned the garden again, noticing more changes. The area Claire had called her secret garden, hidden behind tall shrubs, had been cleaned and restored. The little stone bench where she used to sit and read was polished and available once more. It was as if a piece of Claire had returned to the house, and for some inexplicable reason, that made him even angrier. "Look what we planted, Daddy." Lily got up, picking up her sketchbook. "They're real flowers, and some have already sprouted. Evelyn taught me how to take care of them, and—" "Lily," Noah interrupted, his tone harsher than he intended. "Go inside." Now, the happiness vanished from the girl's face, replaced by confusion and hurt. "But Daddy—" "Now, Lily." The girl lowered her head, hugging the sketchbook to her chest. She glanced at Evelyn one last time before trudging back into the house. Only when she was inside did Noah turn his attention to the gardener. "I don't recall authorizing such extensive changes to the garden," he said, his voice controlled but icy. Evelyn held his gaze without flinching. "The garden needed urgent care, sir. Many plants were dying from lack of proper maintenance. And I don't recall hiring you to spend time with my daughter." A flash of indignation crossed Evelyn's face. "Lily came to me on her own. She showed interest in the garden and the plants. It seemed important not to discourage her, considering what? Noah cut her off, stepping toward her in a threatening manner. You don't know my daughter. You know nothing about our family or our circumstances. Evelyn stood her ground, even as he approached. All I know is what I've seen. A silent child who started talking and smiling again when she connected with nature. I did nothing but answer her questions and let her help with simple tasks. It's not your place to decide what's good for Lily. She's my daughter. Something in his tone made Evelyn take a step back. It wasn't fear, but a sudden realization. You're angry because she smiled at me, she said, too quietly for anyone but Noah to hear. The frankness of her words hit Noah like a slap. He felt his face grow hot, anger welling up in his chest. You're fired, he declared, his voice cutting. Pack your things and leave my property. Now. A tense silence fell between them. Evelyn seemed about to say something, but thought better of it. With a brief nod, she turned to gather her tools. Leave them, Noah ordered. Just go. Without another word, Evelyn walked toward the side of the house, heading for the back exit. Noah watched her go, a maelstrom of contradictory emotions swirling inside him. Part of him knew he was being irrational, unjust. But his wounded pride roared louder. How had a stranger done in days what he couldn't do in months? How had this woman, with her simple clothes and soil-stained hands, brought back Lily's smile when all the specialists he'd hired had failed? And the garden, how had she managed to restore it so perfectly, returning the beauty it had in Claire's time? Every flowerbed, every path, every detail seemed to honor the memory of the wife he had lost. Instead of feeling grateful, he felt even more furious, as if Evelyn had invaded his private sanctuary. Feeling suddenly exhausted, Noah returned inside. Margaret was in the hall with a worried expression. You're back earlier than expected, she commented carefully. Shall I fix you something to eat? No, where's Lily? In her room, sir. Noah nodded and climbed the stairs. He stopped at Lily's door, unsure, something unusual for a man used to making decisions that affected hundreds of employees without a moment's hesitation. He knocked softly and walked in. Lily was sitting by the window, her sketchbook on her lap, staring at the garden. When she heard the door, she turned her head. Her eyes were red but dry. Lily, he began, stepping closer. We need to talk. The girl didn't answer, turning her gaze back to the garden. Lily, look at me when I'm talking to you, Noah demanded, frustration mounting at her silence. Slowly, the child turned to him. Her blue eyes, so much like Claire's, looked empty, distant. That woman, Evelyn, isn't going to work here anymore, he explained, trying to soften his tone. She was just a temporary gardener. She was my friend, Lily said, her voice small but firm. You barely knew her, sweetheart. She liked Mommy's garden. And she taught me how to take care of the flowers. Noah felt a pang of guilt, quickly suppressed. I can hire a professional landscaper if you like the garden so much. Someone with credentials, references. Lily shook her head, turning back to the window. It won't be the same. Frustrated by his inability to reach his daughter, Noah changed tactics. I brought you a present, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a porcelain doll, carefully wrapped, a collector's item he'd found in an antique shop in Shanghai. Lily looked at the doll without enthusiasm. Thank you, she said mechanically, not extending her hand to take it. Defeated, Noah placed the doll on her bedside table and left the room. The hours that followed marked a return to the silence that had gripped the house before his trip. Lily refused to come down for dinner. Sarah reported that the child asked to eat in her room, something she hadn't done in weeks. Sitting alone at the large dining table, Noah tried to focus on the reports his assistant had sent. But his mind kept drifting back to the scene in the garden, to Lily's radiant face when she was with Evelyn, and to the empty look she had worn afterward. Had he done the right thing? This woman was a stranger with no references, no background. She showed up at his door and he let her into his home near his daughter on a whim. It was irresponsible to let her stay. But then, why did sending her away feel so wrong? The sound of footsteps broke his thoughts. Sarah stood at the dining room door with an expression of determination Noah rarely saw in the gentle nanny. Mr. Lancaster, may I speak with you? Noah gestured for her to come in. Is something wrong with Lily? Sarah approached the table, hands clasped in front of her. She won't leave her room. She doesn't want to draw, doesn't want to read, doesn't want to do anything. She's just upset. It will pass. With all due respect, sir, Sarah said, taking a breath as if summoning courage. It won't pass. Not this time. Noah lifted his eyes from the papers, surprised by her tone. What do you mean? In the past week, Lily was finally coming out of her shell. She started talking again, laughing, showing interest in things. She was drawing again, something she hasn't done since Mrs. Clare passed away. Noah felt his jaw clench. You're attributing that to the gardener. I'm not saying it was only because of Miss Evelyn. But she played an important role, yes. She treated Lily with respect, answered her questions, taught her about the world, and most importantly, she didn't treat her like a fragile doll that could break at any moment. Sarah's frankness was uncommon. Usually she was gentle and compliant, never questioning Noah's decisions. I don't recall asking your opinion on how I raise my daughter, he replied, slamming the folder shut more forcefully than necessary. Sarah paled, but didn't back down. You're right. It's not my place to comment. But I've spent more time with Lily this past year than anyone else in this house, including you. I've seen what works and what doesn't. And sending away the only person who made her genuinely smile in 12 months, she hesitated. Choosing her words was a mistake. Noah stood abruptly, his chair scraping the wooden floor. That's enough, Sarah. The nanny understood she was being dismissed. She nodded briefly and turned to leave. Oh, and Sarah, Noah called, stopping her at the door. If you have problems with my decisions about this house or Lily, perhaps you should consider finding another job. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression a mix of disappointment and pity. If I leave, Mr. Lancaster, who will really see Lily? With those words, she left, leaving Noah alone with his troubled thoughts. He sat down again, trying to focus on the documents, but Sarah's words echoed in his mind. Sending away the only person who made her genuinely smile was a mistake. Irritated with himself, Noah got up and poured a generous measure of whiskey. He walked to the window overlooking the garden, now bathed in silver moonlight. Even in the semi-darkness, he could see the impressive transformation. Where there had been neglect, there was now order and beauty. Every plant seemed purposely placed, every flower bed meticulously designed. It was the kind of work requiring not just technical skill, but passion. Claire's garden had been reborn, and he had just expelled the person responsible for it. A movement on the second floor caught his attention. Lily's silhouette appeared in her bedroom window, small and alone, gazing at the garden. Noah watched his daughter for long minutes, feeling a tightening in his chest he couldn't quite name. For the first time since Claire died, Noah Lancaster felt deeply uncomfortable with the man he had become, the man who had dismissed, without explanation, someone who brought joy to his daughter, the man who preferred to see his daughter silent and obedient rather than happy under another's influence, the man who, even faced with the clear evidence of his mistake, was too proud to admit it. He finished his whiskey in one gulp and headed to his office. Maybe a night of work would silence the nagging voice in his mind that kept saying, "You messed up, Noah." And it's not the first time. 3 days passed after Evelyn's departure, and the Lancaster mansion returned to what it had been before, silent as a mausoleum. Lily spent hours in her room, refusing to come down for meals. The few times she did speak, it was to ask when Evelyn would return. Noah watched this regression with growing concern. The previous night, he'd heard Lily crying softly as he passed her door. He stopped, hand on the doorknob, but didn't go in. What would he say? How would he explain to a 4-year-old that he had sent away the only person who'd made her smile in months because of his own wounded pride? On the morning of the 4th day, Noah entered his office earlier than usual. The restless night had given him dark circles under his eyes, but his mind was clear for the first time in days. He had made a decision. He picked up the phone and called Margaret. "I need you to find out everything you can about Evelyn Turner," he said bluntly. Who recommended her, where she worked before, how she found out about the job. Everything. "Mr. Lancaster, no one recommended her," Margaret replied hesitantly. "She just appeared at the gate that morning, asking for work. You hired her yourself." Noah frowned. That was true. On a moment of, impulse? Curiosity. He had given a chance to a total stranger. She must have mentioned something about her past to someone on the staff. Ask everyone. I want that information today. Yes, sir. Noah hung up and turned his attention to the mountain of documents on his desk. Though he tried to concentrate on the contracts and reports demanding his attention, his thoughts kept returning to Lily's hurt expression and the garden that now seemed to accuse him every time he looked out the window. By midday, Margaret knocked on the office door. Come in, Noah ordered, attempting to seem absorbed in his work. Margaret entered, holding a small notepad. I got some information about Miss Turner, sir. Noah gestured for her to sit. Go on. Margaret consulted her notes. Betty, the cook, spoke with her the most. From what we gathered, Miss Turner was an art teacher for children at a primary school in a town called Westville, about 2 hours away. She was reportedly well respected and loved by her students. So how did she go from a respected teacher to a gardener with no references? Noah asked, leaning forward. Margaret hesitated. It seems there was a tragedy, sir. From what Betty understood, Miss Turner lost someone very close, possibly a child, and couldn't continue teaching. She sold everything and spent the last few months traveling from town to town, taking on temporary work. A child. The information hit Noah like a punch. He sank back in his chair, absorbing the blow. Anything else? References, education. Sarah mentioned her extensive knowledge of botany and art. Apparently, Miss Turner studied both at university. How did she know about the garden? How did she know we needed a gardener? Margaret shook her head. That we don't know. But Beth, the maid, recalls hearing Miss Turner say that some gardens speak to her, that she can sense when they need help. Beth thought it was just a poetic expression. Noah dismissed Margaret with a wave, needing to be alone with his thoughts. After she left, he opened his laptop and began searching. Evelyn Turner, art teacher, Westville. The results appeared quickly. Local newspaper articles showed a younger woman, hair shorter, smiling broadly, surrounded by children at a school art exhibit. Another article showed the same woman receiving a community award for a program that used art to help children with trauma. He kept digging and then he found it. A small note from 3 years ago. Community mourns tragic death of teacher Evelyn Turner's child. No details about the cause, just mentions of the school support and the indefinite leave Evelyn had requested. He needed more information. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of his private investigator, the same one he used to vet potential business partners. Maxwell, I need a favor. Everything you can find on Evelyn Turner, former art teacher in Westville. He provided the details he already knew and hung up. Maxwell was efficient. He'd have a full report in a few hours. While waiting, Noah tried to work, but his mind wouldn't settle. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden. The afternoon sun lit the newly planted flowers, highlighting the meticulous care evident in each flower bed arrangement. It wasn't just competent work, it was art. Maxwell's report arrived by email late in the afternoon. Noah opened it immediately, his eyes devouring the information. Evelyn Marie Turner, 34 years old, degree in visual arts and botany from State University, award-winning teacher, married to Thomas Turner, a civil engineer. One son, Oliver, born 6 years earlier. Then the tragedy. Oliver, at just 3 years old, diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia. After months of treatment, the boy passed away. 6 months later, Evelyn's and Thomas's marriage, already shattered by grief, ended. Thomas moved abroad. Evelyn sold the house, donated most of her belongings, and essentially disappeared for almost 2 years. No formal employment since then, only temporary gigs in different towns. Gardening, antique furniture restoration, private art lessons. No criminal record, no debts, no sign of concerning behavior. Just a woman trying to rebuild her life after losing it all. Noah closed the laptop, feeling a weight on his chest. The image he'd formed of Evelyn, a schemer with no skills, was completely wrong. She was educated, talented, experienced in working with children, and she knew the pain of losing a loved one in a way few could. Maybe that was why Lily instinctively connected with her, the unspoken understanding of someone who knew loss. While he, Noah, had tried to protect his daughter by hiding his own pain, Evelyn had offered something far more valuable, the truth that one could feel pain and still go on living. Noah shook his head, confronting his own arrogance. He had judged Evelyn based on appearances, on prejudices. He had never given her a real chance, never tried to know her. And now he needed to find her, not just for Lily, but to correct his mistake, to prove to himself he could still recognize when he was wrong. "Frank," he called, grabbing his coat, "get the car ready." The Hope House shelter was on the west side of the city, a simple two-story building with a discreet sign out front. Noah had never set foot in a place like that before, and he felt out of place parking his Bentley on the modest street. Maxwell had discovered that Evelyn was staying there, a shelter for people in transition, offering temporary lodging while they looked for work and permanent housing. The receptionist eyed the well-dressed man warily as he walked in. "May I help you? I'm looking for Evelyn Turner. He hesitated. What was he to Evelyn? Not a friend, certainly. Not exactly a former employer, given how it ended. "I'm Noah Lancaster. She worked for me recently." The woman evaluated him for a moment, as if assessing his intentions. "Wait here, please." She disappeared through a side door, leaving Noah alone in the small reception area. He observed the surroundings, clean but worn walls, simple furniture, a table with brochures about jobs and social services, a world entirely unlike his own. Minutes later, the receptionist returned. "Mrs. Turner will see you in the common room." "This way, please." Noah followed her down a hallway into a large room with several tables and chairs. It was nearly empty at this hour, except for an elderly man reading a newspaper in the corner and Evelyn sitting by the window. She didn't stand when she saw him. Her green eyes watched him cautiously, her face expressionless. "Mr. Lancaster," she said with a brief nod. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." Noah hesitated, suddenly at a loss for words. All his usual confidence, so useful in boardrooms, seemed to have abandoned him. "May I sit?" he asked, indicating the chair across from her. Evelyn nodded, still wary. "How did you find me?" "I have resources," he said, immediately realizing how arrogant it sounded. "I mean, I needed to talk to you about Lily." At the mention of the girl's name, Evelyn's expression softened. "Is she okay?" Noah ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of nerves. "No, she's not. Since you left, she's back to how she was before. She hardly talks, doesn't smile, barely eats." Evelyn lowered her eyes, a shadow of sadness crossing her face. "I'm sorry for her. Lily is a special child, sensitive." "That's why I'm here," Noah said, leaning forward. "I'd like you to come back." Evelyn raised her eyes, genuine surprise evident. "Come back? To work in the garden? To—" He hesitated. Apologizing was not something he did often. "To fix the mistake I made." Silence fell between them. Evelyn studied him carefully, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. "Why did you send me away, Mr. Lancaster?" she finally asked, her voice calm but direct. The question caught him off guard. He'd expected resistance, perhaps anger, but not this frankness. I was jealous," he began, then stopped. The easy answer would be to lie, invent some professional justification. But something told him Evelyn would see right through that. "I got jealous." The admission hung in the air, raw and honest. "Jealous," she repeated, frowning slightly. "Of how Lily responded to you, of how she smiled, talked, opened up. Things I couldn't make happen for a whole year, you did in days." Evelyn didn't reply immediately, letting his words fill the space. "Do you fault her for not getting over her mother's loss more quickly?" she asked gently. The question struck Noah like a punch in the gut. "No, of course not. Then why blame yourself for not being able to fix her pain?" Noah stared at Evelyn, astonished by the insight in her question. He'd never thought of it that way. "Maybe," she continued, her voice softer now, "Lily doesn't need you to fix anything. Maybe she just needs to know it's okay to feel what she feels." Evelyn's words left him speechless. It was a perspective he'd never considered. In his mind, As a father, his job was to protect Lily from pain, not teach her how to live with it. The garden helped, Evelyn said after a moment. There was something healing for her in seeing the plants grow, in creating something new. But the real point was that, out there, she could just be a 4-year-old, without the pressure of pretending she was all right. Noah nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "Please," he said, the words almost painful in his rarely apologetic mouth. "Come back, not for me, but for Lily." Evelyn studied him for a long time, as if searching his face. "And what if you decide again that you don't want me around? If you feel threatened by my connection with your daughter, that won't happen. How can I trust that?" It was a fair question. Noah took a deep breath, looking for an honest response. "Because now I know who you are, Evelyn. I know about Oliver." The mention of her son's name made Evelyn go pale. "You dug into my life. I had to understand. And after learning—" Noah paused, choosing his words carefully. "I see now why Lily connected with you. You share something I can't fully grasp." Evelyn's eyes brimmed with tears she held back. "Do you think I'm using your daughter to fill the void my son left?" "No," Noah replied quickly. "I think your own pain gave you a unique ability to understand hers, and that's valuable." Evelyn remained silent, her gaze distant as though looking at something beyond the room. "Lily isn't just grieving for her mother," she finally said. "She also misses you, Mr. Lancaster. You're there physically, but emotionally." She left the sentence unfinished, but Noah understood. He had withdrawn, buried himself in work, in coldness, in arrogance. He had become a stranger to his own daughter. "I'm willing to change that," he said. "If you come back, I promise to do my part too." A silence settled over them. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting orange shadows through the window. At last, Evelyn spoke. "I'll come back for Lily, but on one condition." "What is it?" "That you spend at least 1 hour a day in the garden with her. Not necessarily with me, just the two of you." Noah nodded, feeling both relief and anxiety. "Deal." Evelyn got up, indicating that the conversation was over. "I can start tomorrow morning." "Yes, I'll have Frank pick you up." "That's not necessary. I can take the bus like before." Noah hesitated, then agreed. This humility, this lack of interest in exploiting his status and wealth, was more proof he had judged Evelyn completely wrong. Leaving the shelter and getting into his luxury car, Noah Lancaster, a man used to considering himself above almost everyone, felt small in the face of the dignity and strength of that woman. For the first time in a long while, he wondered if his arrogance hadn't blinded him to many other valuable things in his life. And what if he'd been different with Lily from the start? Instead of trying to shield her from pain by hiding his own, what if he had simply been there with her through their grief? It was too late to change the past, but maybe not too late to change the future. Tomorrow, Evelyn would come back, and with her, perhaps, a second chance for Noah to learn how to be the father Lily really needed. Noah Lancaster watched from his office window as Evelyn arrived. She came along the side path, dressed as simply as ever, jeans, a t-shirt, hair in a messy bun. She carried a worn backpack and walked with determined steps, though there was a slight hesitation in her posture, as if she was still unsure about returning. He hadn't told Lily about Evelyn's return. He didn't want to raise her hopes if Evelyn changed her mind at the last minute. The little girl was still quiet, refusing to come down for breakfast, communicating only with nods and single words when absolutely necessary. Noah left his vantage point and went downstairs, arriving in the main hall just as Margaret opened the door for Evelyn. "Good morning," Noah said formally, keeping a safe distance. He still didn't quite know how to act around her after their conversation at the shelter. "Good morning, Mr. Lancaster," Evelyn replied, equally formal. An awkward silence fell between them until Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, holding Lily's hand. The girl was still in her pajamas, her hair messy, eyes downcast. "Lily, dear," Sarah said gently. "Look who's here." The girl slowly lifted her gaze, and when her eyes found Evelyn, it was as though someone flipped a switch. Her face lit up instantly. "Evelyn!" she cried out, and before any adult could react, she pulled free of Sarah's hand, ran down the stairs, jumped the last few steps, and threw herself into Evelyn's arms. The force of the hug nearly toppled Evelyn, who knelt down to better hold the child. Lily clung to her as though afraid she might vanish at any moment. "You came back," she exclaimed between happy sobs. "You came back." Evelyn hugged Lily tightly, tears shining in her own eyes. "Yes, little one, I'm back." Noah stood there, frozen. The intensity of Lily's reaction caught him completely off guard. In the entire year since Claire's death, Lily had never shown this much emotion, not even with him. He felt a sharp stab of jealousy, swiftly replaced by a wave of gratitude and guilt. How had he been so blind to how badly his daughter needed this connection? "Shall we go see your flowers?" Evelyn asked, still holding Lily. "I bet they've grown since we last saw them." Lily nodded vigorously, grabbing Evelyn's hand. "Sarah helped me water them every day, just like you taught me, and I talked to them morning and night so they wouldn't feel lonely." "That's wonderful. Plants love it when we talk to them." The two headed to the garden, Lily chattering excitedly about everything that had happened in Evelyn's absence. Sarah gave Noah a meaningful look before following them. Alone in the hall, Noah tried to process what he'd just witnessed. The contrast between Lily just minutes before, head down silent, and the vibrant child now running to the garden was so stark it hurt. How could he not have seen how deeply his daughter was suffering? How had he failed to notice that his way of coping, closing himself off in work, was pushing away the one person who really mattered? The days that followed introduced a new routine at the Lancaster mansion. Contrary to his usual habits, Noah worked more from home, splitting his time between his office and brief breaks to watch Lily and Evelyn in the garden. From his office window, he saw them planting, watering, chatting. Evelyn taught Lily to identify different types of plants, to understand signs of when they needed more water or sunlight. But it wasn't just gardening lessons. Noah realized something deeper was happening. One morning, he saw Evelyn comforting Lily when a butterfly they were observing flew away. "Some things we can't keep by our side forever," he heard Evelyn say. "But that doesn't mean they weren't important, or that we should stop appreciating the time we had with them." It was a lesson about loss, explained in a way a 4-year-old could grasp. And it was exactly the kind of conversation Noah had never managed to have with his daughter. On another occasion, he watched them sitting on the grass, drawing. Lily pointed to something in her picture and asked, "Why is the sky blue?" Rather than give a simplistic answer, Evelyn explained about sunlight and how it scatters in the atmosphere. When Lily seemed confused, Evelyn took a glass of water and a little milk, mixing a few drops to show how the water turned bluish when light passed through it. "Wow!" Lily exclaimed, fascinated. "It's magic. It's science," Evelyn gently corrected. "But sometimes science feels like magic, doesn't it?" Noah realized, with a pang of shame, that he had no idea his daughter was interested in butterflies, or the sky, or anything else that now seemed to captivate her. He had been so busy trying to protect her that he'd never truly gotten to know her. At the end of the first week after Evelyn's return, Noah finally kept his promise to spend time in the garden with Lily. It was an uncomfortable experience at first. He didn't know what to say or how to act. His business instincts were useless for bonding with a 4-year-old. "What do you usually do here with Evelyn?" he asked, feeling awkward on the small garden bench where Lily insisted they sit. The girl looked at him as if the answer was obvious. "We listen." "Listen to what?" "Everything. The bees, the wind, the leaves." Lily closed her eyes and tilted her head. "Try it, Daddy." Feeling somewhat silly, Noah closed his eyes and tried to listen. At first, he heard nothing but distant traffic and the sound of the irrigation system, but gradually, he began to notice other sounds, the gentle hum of a nearby bee, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, a bird singing in a branch above them. "I can hear it," he said, surprised by how many sounds he'd been ignoring. Lily smiled, pleased with her father's progress. "Evelyn says most people forget how to really listen. They only hear what they want or whatever's loudest." The remark, coming from such a young child, caught Noah off guard. It was a deep truth, simply expressed. Exactly how he'd lived the past year, listening only to the noise of his own thoughts, his business, ignoring the silent signs that his daughter needed him. In the following days, Noah began paying more attention. He noticed Lily preferred apple juice to orange, that she always put her right shoe on before her left, that she bit her lip when deeply focused on a drawing. Small details that, as her father, he should have known years ago. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after Evelyn's return, Noah found Lily in the living room, leaning over her sketchbook. She rarely used that room before, preferring her bedroom or the garden. "What are you drawing?" he asked, approaching. Lily looked up, hesitated a moment, then turned the sketchbook so he could see. Noah was immediately unsettled by what he saw. On the paper, drawn in childish but recognizable lines, were 3 figures. A small girl in a blue dress, clearly meant to be Lily, a tall man in a suit representing Noah, and a brown-haired woman in simple clothes, Evelyn. All 3 were holding hands, wearing big smiles. Above them, a bright yellow sun and a few clouds. Below, what seemed to be the garden, with colorful flowers and a butterfly. What unsettled him wasn't the quality of the drawing, but the fact that Evelyn was included. On paper, they looked like a family. "That's really nice," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Why did you draw Evelyn with us?" Lily studied the drawing, then looked at her father with the serious expression she got when considering an important question. "Because she makes us happy," she replied simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Her answer hit Noah like a brick. She makes us happy, not just Lily, but us, including him. Could it be that Evelyn's presence had affected him too, without his noticing? He had indeed felt more at peace in the past few weeks than he had all year. "Can I show Evelyn?" Lily asked, already gathering up the drawing. "Sure," Noah said automatically, still processing the profound simplicity of his daughter's observation. Lily ran off toward the garden, leaving Noah with his unsettled thoughts. "She makes us happy." The words echoed in his mind, challenging the barrier he'd built around his heart since Claire's death. He decided he needed to talk to Evelyn, really talk, not just exchange polite remarks or discuss the garden. He needed to understand how this woman, a near stranger until a few weeks ago, had become so important to his daughter, and perhaps, though he wasn't ready to admit it, to him as well. He found them in the garden. Lily was proudly showing Evelyn the drawing, which Evelyn praised warmly. "Lily," Noah called, "I think Sarah's looking for you. Something about a new book that just arrived." The girl glanced between her father and Evelyn, reluctant to leave. "Go on," Evelyn encouraged with a smile. "We can continue our talk later." Once Lily was gone, an awkward silence settled between the 2 adults. Noah sat on a stone bench near where Evelyn was kneeling, tending a lavender bed. "She showed you the drawing," Evelyn said, not taking her eyes off the plants. "Yes, it was eye-opening." Evelyn smiled slightly, still not looking at him. "Children have a way of getting straight to the point, don't they?" "She said you make us happy," Noah noted, carefully watching Evelyn's reaction. The woman finally stopped what she was doing and sat on the grass, facing him. "Does that bother you?" "It confuses me," he admitted. "You're practically a stranger to us." A flicker of hurt crossed Evelyn's eyes. "Maybe I was a stranger to you, Mr. Lancaster, but not to Lily. How did you connect with her so quickly?" "The best child therapists in the city tried for months." Evelyn remained silent for a moment, as though deciding how much to share. "Maybe because I wasn't trying to fix her," she finally said. "I just let her be who she is, with all the sadness and confusion that entails. And you understand what she's going through," Noah added, not as a question. Evelyn looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I know about Oliver," Noah said quietly. "I know you lost your son." A shadow passed over Evelyn's face. She picked up a handful of soil and let it trickle through her fingers before speaking. "Oliver had just turned 3 when he was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive leukemia. We fought for 8 months. In the end, not all the medicine in the world was enough." Her voice was calm, but Noah could feel the depth of the pain in those simple words. "After that, I lost everything. My marriage collapsed. I couldn't teach anymore, seeing other children every day. I sold the house, donated almost everything. I spent a long time just wandering, working odd jobs and just enough to survive." Noah listened in silence, realizing this woman had endured a grief as deep as his, maybe even deeper. "How did you move on?" he asked before he could stop himself. Evelyn looked him directly in the eye. "Who said I moved on?" The response caught him off guard. "But you're here. You're helping Lily, restoring the garden. You're alive." "Existing isn't the same as living, Mr. Lancaster. For a long time I was just existing," Evelyn said, looking up at the sky and taking a deep breath. "It was only when I started working with plants that something changed. There's something about their simplicity, how they keep growing even in the harshest conditions. They don't question, don't fight what they can't change. They just adapt and carry on." Noah felt a lump in his throat. It was exactly the opposite of what he had done. He had fought reality, closed himself off, refused to accept Claire's loss, and in the process, he nearly lost Lily too. "Then I met your daughter," Evelyn continued. "A child going through her own desert of sorrow. I didn't plan to get close to her, but when I saw those sad eyes watching the garden, something recognized itself in her. Maybe because I know what it's like to feel a hole in your chest where love used to be." The revelation struck Noah deeply, struck Noah. For the first time, he saw Evelyn not as an intruder or a threat, but as someone who truly understood. Someone who, despite losing everything, still found the strength to offer comfort to a child who wasn't hers. "I always thought I had to protect Lily from pain," he admitted. "That being strong meant not showing weakness. But losing a child taught me there is no protection from certain pains," Evelyn said gently. "You can only go through it. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone who's hurting is simply being there without trying to fix them." In that moment, something changed inside Noah. A barrier he hadn't known existed began to crumble. He saw clearly how his arrogance, his need for control, and his refusal to accept help or show vulnerability had created a chasm between him and his daughter. "I need to change," he said, almost to himself. "We all do, at some point," Evelyn replied. A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but filled with mutual understanding. Noah looked around the garden, noting how it had flourished under Evelyn's care, just like Lily. "Thank you," he said at last, "for everything you've done for Lily, and for this conversation." Evelyn nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "You're welcome, Mr. Lancaster." "Noah," he corrected. "After all this, you can call me Noah." In the days that followed, Noah spent even more time at home, observing how Evelyn interacted with Lily, trying to learn from it. He realized he didn't know his daughter's favorite foods, her fears, her dreams. He began asking questions, truly listening, being present not just physically, but emotionally. It was a slow process, often awkward. A lifetime of habits doesn't disappear overnight. His natural arrogance still surfaced in tense moments. His controlling nature still urged him to dictate how things should go. He still struggled to fully admit his approach had been wrong, that he needed to change something fundamental within himself. But it was a start. A small seed of transformation, like the seeds Lily had so carefully planted in the garden. With time, with consistent care, perhaps it could grow into something stronger and more lasting. One Saturday morning dawned exceptionally blue. Summer was nearing its end, days still hot but with a faint hint of autumn in the air. Noah Lancaster woke earlier than usual for a weekend. In recent months, he'd gotten used to spending Saturdays in meetings or reviewing contracts in his office. But today would be different. He went downstairs, still in his robe, something he would never have done before. In the kitchen, he found Betty making pancakes. "Good morning, Mr. Lancaster," she greeted, surprised to see him so early. "I didn't expect you for breakfast. Shall I make something special?" "The pancakes look great, Betty," he said, pouring himself coffee. "Is Lily up yet?" "Not yet, sir, but she shouldn't be long. She's been excited about Saturdays since Miss Turner started spending mornings here." Noah nodded, feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Evelyn didn't know it, but he had cancelled all his appointments for the day. He had a surprise planned, something he'd discussed with Sarah the night before. While sipping his coffee, he heard eager footsteps on the stairs. Lily bounded into the kitchen, already dressed, her hair in two uneven braids she'd likely done herself. "Daddy!" she exclaimed. stopping in surprise when she saw him. "Aren't you working?" The innocent question stung Noah more than any explicit reprimand could have. It was Saturday morning, and his own daughter found it odd to see him at home. "Not today, princess," he said, opening his arms. "I thought we could spend the day together." The look of surprise on Lily's face turned into a radiant smile. She ran into her father's arms, and he lifted her up and spun her around, making her laugh with that pure, crystalline laugh he once thought he'd never hear again. "Can we go to the garden?" she asked when he finally put her down. "Evelyn's coming to help with the new flowers." "Of course," Noah replied. "Actually, I have a surprise for both of you." Lily's eyes went wide with curiosity. "What surprise?" "If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise," he teased, winking. "Let's have breakfast first. Then when Evelyn arrives, we'll find out together." After breakfast, father and daughter headed to the garden. Over the past few months, it had completely changed. What was once a painful reminder of Claire's absence had become a place of life and renewal. The roses, which had meant so much to his late wife, were now thriving again. But it wasn't just Claire's plants that had been restored. New flower beds had been planted. Flowers Lily chose and sowed herself. "There she is," Lily pointed to the side entrance. Evelyn walked along the stone path, carrying a small box. She wore jeans and a light blue shirt, her hair loose in the breeze. Noah noticed something different about her, a lightness, a glow that wasn't there before. "Good morning," she greeted, smiling as Lily ran up to her. "And what a pleasant surprise to see you here so early, Mr. Noah," she corrected, still adapting to the informality he had requested. "Daddy has a surprise for us," Lily announced, hopping up and down. "But he won't tell me what it is." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, looking curiously at Noah. "Well, that sounds interesting." "Can we show it now?" Lily asked, tugging on her father's hand. Noah grinned. "Sure, it's on the back porch." The three of them walked to the wide veranda overlooking the garden. On the table, covered by a cloth, was something Evelyn and Lily couldn't identify. "Go ahead," Noah said to Lily. "Show Evelyn what we put together." With a theatrical flourish, the girl pulled off the cloth, revealing 3 sketch pads, a professional set of colored pencils, watercolor paints, brushes, and various other art supplies. "Ta-da!" Lily exclaimed. Evelyn looked at the supplies, then at Noah, a silent question in her eyes. "I thought we could have an art lesson today," he explained, feeling uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Lily told me you used to be an art teacher, and Sarah mentioned it was something you and Lily might enjoy doing together." "An art lesson," Evelyn repeated, still taken aback. "And you're going to participate. If you two will have me as a student," he replied with a slightly unsure smile. Lily clapped her hands, thrilled by the idea. "Yes, we can teach Daddy how to draw. He's terrible at it, you know." Noah feigned indignation, making Lily laugh even more. "Hey, my stick figures are world-renowned," Evelyn laughed, a genuine laugh that lit up her face. It was rare to see her so at ease, especially around Noah. "Well, then we have a lot of work to do," she teased. "Where should we start, Lily?" The girl immediately took on the role of assistant, organizing the supplies with comedic seriousness. "First, we need to decide what we're drawing," she declared with the authority of her 4 years. Evelyn naturally stepped into her teaching role, suggesting they begin with something simple, observing and sketching a flower. They chose a daisy from the garden, which Noah picked and placed in a small vase at the center of the table. "Look carefully," Evelyn instructed. "Not just at the general shape, but at the details. How many petals are there? How do they connect to the center? What are the exact colors?" Noah watched, fascinated, as Evelyn guided Lily with questions rather than giving direct instructions, encouraging her to discover things on her own. It was utterly different from his business approach, where everything was about efficiency and immediate results. When it was time to start drawing, Noah picked up his pencil and froze. He couldn't remember the last time he'd tried to create something purely for the sake of creation, something without a practical purpose. His hand trembled slightly over the blank page. He felt ridiculously nervous, like he was about to present to a board of directors, not sketch a simple flower with his daughter. "It's okay, Daddy," Lily said, noticing his hesitation. With surprising naturalness, She placed her tiny hand over his large one. "Just draw a circle first." "Like this?" She guided his hand, helping him trace a wobbly circle for the flower's center. "See, it's not so hard." Noah felt a lump form in his throat. Here was his daughter, patiently teaching him what he had never been patient enough to do, offering help without judgment, something he rarely did. Evelyn watched with a gentle smile, recognizing the moment's significance. Tactfully, she moved a little away, giving father and daughter space to connect. "Now the petals," Lily continued, fully absorbed in her role as teacher. "They're kind of like stretched-out teardrops. You can do it." For over an hour, the three of them drew together. The results varied. Evelyn's was skillful and detailed, Lily's was charmingly disproportionate but full of personality, and Noah's, well, it clearly belonged to someone who hadn't drawn since childhood. "It's not as pretty as yours," he told Lily, comparing their drawings. "But you tried," she replied simply. "And next time you'll do better." Next time. Her words echoed in Noah's mind. His daughter already assumed there would be more mornings like this, more moments together. He realized how rarely he'd truly been present for Lily in the past months, how he'd retreated into his own coldness and work, failing to protect her from pain and instead abandoning her emotionally. His distance, his emotional absence, his obsession with work, none of it had protected Lily from grief. It had only pushed her away when she needed him most. "I think it's snack time," Evelyn suggested, noticing the emotion on Noah's face. "Lily, why don't you ask Betty to bring something? Maybe those chocolate cookies you love." The child nodded and dashed inside, leaving the adults alone on the veranda. "Are you all right?" Evelyn asked once Lily was out of earshot. Noah shook his head, momentarily speechless. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick. "How could I have been so blind, so stupid?" "You were grieving," Evelyn replied gently. "We all make misguided choices when we're caught in the storm. But she's my daughter, my responsibility, and I abandoned her emotionally, just when she needed me most." Evelyn sat beside him, her green eyes reflecting understanding rather than judgment. "You know what's wonderful about children? They live in the present. Lily isn't holding a grudge about the past. She's happy because you're here now, drawing with her, even if your drawing looks, She hesitated, looking for a diplomatic word. "A disaster," Noah suggested, with a faint smile. "I was going to say abstract, but yes, a disaster works." They both laughed, and Noah felt something inside him loosen, like a tight knot unwinding. "Thank you," he said, meeting her gaze. "For everything you've done for Lily, for us." "It's my job," Evelyn replied, looking away. "No, it's much more than that, and you know it." Just then, Lily reappeared, announcing that the cookies would be ready in 10 minutes. The following weeks brought even deeper changes to the Lancaster household. The garden, now fully restored, had become the heart of the property. The summer flowers were at their peak, and new varieties had been planted for the approaching fall. But it wasn't just the garden that flourished. For the first time since Claire's death, the house didn't feel like a mausoleum. The curtains remained open during the day, flooding rooms with natural light. Music returned, initially through Lily's revived piano lessons, then through small speakers Noah set up in various rooms, playing the jazz melodies Claire had loved so much. Lily's laughter echoed down the hallways, no longer restrained as if it were inappropriate, and to everyone's surprise, Noah himself began to change. Not just his actions, spending more time at home, actively participating in Lily's life, but something more fundamental. The calculating coldness he'd adopted as a shield against pain started to melt. His rigid posture softened. He allowed himself to smile more, even laugh occasionally. Most importantly, he allowed himself to feel, not just the pain that had never truly left, but also joy, hope, and the possibility of a future that wasn't solely dark. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, Noah found Evelyn in the greenhouse, organizing seedlings for the next day. She had begun working full-time at the property, tending not just the garden but also helping with Lily, an arrangement that developed naturally, without formal discussions. "May I come in?" he asked, tapping lightly on the glass door. Evelyn looked up, surprised to see him so late. Of course. Noah stepped inside, feeling the greenhouse's warm humidity contrasting with the cool night air outside. He observed the orderly rows of pots, each labeled in Evelyn's elegant handwriting. "I've been thinking about something," he began, uncharacteristically nervous. "Something I should have done a long time ago." Evelyn paused what she was doing, giving him her full attention, which is, "Thank you, truly thank you, not just out of courtesy or obligation, but sincerely, for everything you've done for us, for me." Evelyn lowered her eyes, visibly moved. "There's no need to thank me." "I do," Noah insisted. "You came into our lives when we were at our worst, and instead of judging us, you gave exactly what we needed. Patience, understanding, room to heal. I don't know where we'd be without you now." Evelyn set the watering can on the bench, giving herself time to gather her emotions. "You also gave me something I needed," she finally admitted. "After Oliver, I was just existing, not living, wandering from place to place, never allowing myself to put down roots, never allowing myself to feel much. Lily brought me back. Her curiosity, her resilience, reminded me that there were still reasons to keep going." Noah nodded, understanding perfectly. "That's why I want to extend a formal invitation. Not just to keep working here, but to stay as part of our family." Evelyn stared at him, clearly surprised. "Part of the family?" "Yes," Noah confirmed. "Lily needs you. And, to be completely honest, so do I." A single tear rolled down Evelyn's cheek, which she wiped away quickly. "I'm not offering charity," Noah hurried to clarify. "The garden has never been better cared for, and what you've done for Lily goes beyond any job description. I'm offering a home, a place where you can put down roots." Evelyn smiled through her tears. "Speaking like a real gardener now." "Put down roots?" Noah laughed, relieved by the break in tension. "I'm learning from the best." A moment of silence settled between them, broken only by the soft drip of water from the irrigation system. "Yes," Evelyn finally said, "I accept your invitation. Thank you." Noah extended his hand, a formal gesture that felt inadequate for the moment, but was the best he could manage just then. Evelyn took it, and something passed between them, an unspoken understanding, an acknowledgement of how far they'd come since that first meeting at the mansion gates. The next morning, Noah woke to the sound of laughter coming from the garden. He looked out his window and saw Lily and Evelyn sitting on the grass, studying something intently. He dressed quickly and went down to join them. "What did you find?" he asked, approaching. Lily looked up, beaming. "A family of ladybugs. Evelyn says they're good for the garden because they eat the bad bugs." Noah knelt beside them, watching the tiny red dots moving across a broad leaf. "They look busy." "Every creature has its purpose," Evelyn said, smiling at Lily. "Even the small ones." "Like us?" Lily asked, glancing from Evelyn to Noah. "Exactly like us," Noah agreed, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. In that simple moment, with the morning sun bathing the garden in golden light, Noah felt a certainty he hadn't felt in a long time. The future, once so bleak and limited, now stretched out before him, full of possibilities. He looked at Lily, absorbed in her discovery, at Evelyn, patient and attentive, and at the garden around them, teeming with life. Everything had changed in the last year. He had changed. And for the first time, he felt that the change was for the better. Claire always used to say that gardens are places of constant transformation, never truly finished, always evolving with the seasons. Maybe life was like that too. Not a journey with a fixed destination, but a continuous process of growth, of endings and rebirth. Noah Lancaster, the man who once believed money and power could solve any problem, who thought emotions were weakness and vulnerability, something to be avoided at all costs, had discovered a different truth. True strength lay in his ability to change, to admit his mistakes, to open himself up to pain and to joy. And as he watched his daughter squeal with delight at the ladybug crawling on her finger, Noah knew he was finally on the right path.